Well, welcome. Congratulations, Mr. Prosecutor.
Thank you.
Welcome to the 2017 budget hearing for the Franklin County Prosecutor. It is your floor.
Thank you, President O'Grady and Commissioners Brooks and Brown. I want to thank first the staff led by Ken Wilson and Zach and Eric and Chris for their work with our office in trying to first submit the budget and then second meet with us to talk about the budget recommendations. And much like some past years, essentially what was requested was recommended. I think there was some slight adjustment as it related to some fringe benefit that had somehow been altered in some very small way. So what I'd like to do is maybe touch on the things that we did this year and some of our challenges into next year as we move forward. The biggest problem, I think not only we, but the sheriff and the community continues to face is the drug use, addiction, overdose problem that the coroner has taken a lead on, that the sheriff has taken a lead on with his HOPE task force. But we, through our drug court last year, at least through the first 3 quarters, approved 405 people into the drug court, operated in the first part of the year by Judge Vanderkar. And then in the latter part of the year, I think they passed it around until they determined which judge was going to have it permanently. And I think that was because you had to be certified by the High Supreme Court as a drug court judge. But I think through the first 3 quarters, with 405 people approved, we screened many others that dependent on past record and amounts, may not have qualified. But I think by the end of the year, we will have the largest number of people approved for drug court that we've had since the court was started in 2009, and I think that's a better way of trying to address the problem. At the same time, and working with the sheriff's office primarily, but CPD as well, we've tried to focus on the people that have sold drugs that cause someone's death. And I think by around November 1st, there were 7 people indicted this year for either involuntary manslaughter and/or murder for selling drugs that cause someone's death. And that always could be something that could be filed, but it never was fully investigated, such that you could connect the dots with the drug sale and the death. Where now both the sheriff and CPD are trying to do that, and that's resulted in those additional charges. I would expect, I think, as the newspaper indicated this morning, that Ohio was #1 in overdose deaths in 2015. Because I found myself being asked to dismiss some cases, and upon further inquiry, as I looked at the cases and the underlying reasons, I saw that the defendant was deceased, and they appeared to have a DOB that would indicate that they hadn't died from a natural death. So I asked the coroner to give to me a list of those who have died of drug overdoses from January of 15 until this was probably around Labor Day. And at that time, there were 400 drug overdose deaths here in Franklin County between January 1st of 15 and Labor Day of this year. And my purpose in asking for that was to try and make sure and check against that list, because sometimes there's a time lag from the time the crime lab gets the drugs and an arrest is made before they can get the test done, and then we can indict it. But at least I think that number was telling about the degree of the problem that needs to be addressed, as well as, I'm no longer dismissing cases because defendant at least died of a drug overdose, and so that cut down some administrative costs. But I think it's a testament of what needs to be done in going forward with the problem, and I think with the state level as well as locally and with the city, that effort is being made. And I think that perhaps our drug court, as I say, will continue to consume our primary effort. I think as a connection to that is our cases, our caseload through, I think it was last week, in the criminal division, we're up 12%. And I think that, again, is partly due to the number of people committing car break-ins, car thefts, burglaries, and robberies due to their drug addiction. So we think that we will have more cases, at least 12 to 15% more criminal cases this year that we handle in our criminal division with the staff of 115 assistant prosecutors that are funded. Those are spread across, as you know, multiple divisions, most of them in the criminal division, 74 attorneys there, 21 in the civil division, which includes the mortgage fraud unit, and then our juvenile division has 20. The staff, the support staff that helps get that job done is funded at a total support staff with some vacancies of 107. And I know there's a vacancy rate that's calculated as well as part of the budget. So I think our matrix system that we've talked about the last couple of years and was funded through the capital fund has been fully implemented in all divisions of the office at this time. And actually I talked to CPD this morning and our grand jury chief counsel's meeting with them just this week. Our hope is by the end of next year to have them submitting their cases electronically through that matrix system, although there's some bugs that we're continuing to try and work out. I think looking to the future, I'm a member of the State Criminal Code Recodification Committee that is coming to its end of its work. There'll be a new bill introduced, I think, probably among the top 10 bills that they identify for passage for the next session of the General Assembly that will impact what we're doing. I think substantial changes dealing with trying to deal with offenders out of the prison system rather than within the prison system, which again could increase CBCF issues as well as county jail issues as we're building the new jail. But I think one suggestion, for example, on theft offenses, it was just increased from a threshold of $500 about 2 years ago to $1,000. One of the recommendations is to increase that threshold to $2,500 for the distinction between a misdemeanor and a felony, which will cause a lot more cases on the theft to go to municipal court as opposed to common police court, because you have to steal a lot to get to the $2,500 level. So our cases will just be major thefts, embezzlements, insurance fraud, and identity fraud if they do pass that increase. So that recodification could impact next year's budget as we move forward. I think our gun and gang and drug unit continue to be the focus of the violent crime, and I think that will continue next year. I think that the one thing I talked to both Mr. Wilson and Mr. Telerik about was in our DTAC fund, because of the program that we worked with the Attorney General and the Mayor, where funds were used, typically we had a large surplus, millions in that fund that we carried over every year. Our contribution to the effort to, I think, acquire and knock down 1,800 properties over a period of 3 years, primarily within the city, reduced that fund substantially. And because we're now selling, originally commenced by former Treasurer Richard Cordray and then adopted by Ed and continued now, our number of foreclosures that generate revenue for the DTAC fund are substantially down. So that is not going to be sustainable going into 2017 and 2018. I've talked to both Zach and Ken about that. So that's an adjustment. I think we'll continue to talk with that will affect not only us, but the treasurer, as well as John Rosenberger's group on the land bank. So I think there are mechanisms to address that we'll have to talk to both the treasurer and the land bank, and I think the finance department is cognizant of that problem, but that was the only thing I wanted to point out.
Okay. It's really striking to hear your comment about the untimely deaths that you have calculated at 400 in 1 year. Are there any other patterns that you're seeing, for example, geographic, socioeconomic, that perhaps the commissioners need to be aware of so that other resources that we have might be brought to bear to assist in preventing this scourge in some way. We've talked about this, gosh, over the last 4 years. We've seen this rise occur. And it's not just, obviously, here, it's throughout the state of Ohio. It's probably in other states, too. And it is in other states, not probably. What else can we do to help? Should be.
Well, I think that 400 number was over a period of about a year and a half, or a little more than a year and a half, and it's still very shocking. I think my observation has been, as the sheriff responds to the scenes where someone's saved by the administration of naloxone, and the person is willing, having had that near-death experience, to get into treatment or rehab, is the availability of the treatment facilities to take the, I guess the demand is the one area which is, I guess, outside my bailiwick, but I think as commissioners that I would be looking at to try and help and fund for the availability of treatments, because if you have a willing person who can't get into wherever they may be heading for 3 to 4 weeks, all of a sudden their willingness that may occur the day after that almost overdose death may dissipate over that 3 weeks before they can find a bed. So it's not an overnight solution, and I know the bill that Senator Portman was involved in Washington that sought some funding for that was signed by the president. I know that that is one avenue, but as they're going into a new funding cycle in Washington, I think there has to be money from there, and I'm not sure where else it would come from, but it would be treatment availability, in my opinion.
Do we know where in our county, just dealing with what we can deal with, where geographically the bulk of these problems are arising, or is it just completely everywhere?
It's everywhere, but the coroner, in taking the lead with her task force, identifies all overdose deaths by zip code, and the two largest number of zip code deaths are 43207 and 43223, I believe, which are the west side. The near south side is, I think, high there, as well as the near east side. But in traveling around with the Attorney General, who has held these overdose forums in most parts of the county, I can recollect being in Bexley, which includes more than 43209, but that there were, I think, 7 overdose deaths in that zip code this year, or within the last year. And so having done a similar one with 6, I think, overdose deaths in the Dublin area zip code, it's a problem that is throughout the whole county. Some parts it's a bigger problem, but the coroner actually has a map that will identify by zip code overdose deaths.
And I knew she was working on that. I'd love to, I think it'd be great for the commissioners to get a copy of that and get our minds around it. And what, men, women, age range, any?
They have all that information, I think, from having attended and presented enough of these forums. Generally, it's probably male whites between 25 and 40 is the largest percentage of the drug overdose deaths that they will identify and compile. But as I say, she has it very detailed and very well done.
Well, thanks for fighting that battle. It's a tough one.
So, Ron, in the heroin or the opiate epidemic, we've got, you've certainly got your area of responsibility in terms of prosecutorial responsibility. The sheriff does in terms of law enforcement. Dr. Ortiz does. Everybody seems to have their own area. And I know Dr. Ortiz has this task force, but we're being asked for some significant resources to try to help, along with this. But I guess what I'm looking for, is there a natural, is there one entity or is there a body who ought to be heading this thing up in terms of its, because everybody's got their area that they have to focus on. But, if we're going to spend all these resources to try to address this, I'd rather spend them in a way where we know that it's being coordinated effectively. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on.
Well, actually, I think that's the
from the addiction.
Well, that's what I was just gonna say. I think that that's the benefit of what the coroner did in taking the lead, because everybody kind of was doing their own thing in each of their own bailiwicks. And what the coroner really has done is by having monthly meetings, everybody is working together more often, and instead of doing their own thing, it's very well coordinated. And, you know, I don't think that's necessarily the coroner's job. It probably is Dave Royer's job, rather than
Well, that's what I'm-
the coroner's job. But at least I think that has worked well, that she has taken that lead and got all the people together and working together, and all the people that should be there, whether it's city EMS, whether
Is it
it's,
the right people at those agencies? And I would agree with you. I'm not sure it ought to be the coroner's mission.
Love that she's picked up the ball.
Yeah, somebody
Love that she's
needs
done
to
that.
do it.
I'm just sitting back and looking at it and thinking, should we be trying to address this on the front end rather than on the back end?
And, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
shouldn't it be either Department of Health? Shouldn't it be possibly Adam H? Shouldn't it be somewhere that catches it early on rather than, as Commissioner O'Grady says,
After the fact.
from
Right,
the
well, Dave
coroner?
Royer is part of what the coroner's been doing, and I think, I guess that's the benefit of, you know, everybody who was doing something is now regularly in the same room trying to address these kind of things, and so I'm not sure who administratively or budget-wise or whatever ought to be the fulcrum of it, but certainly I think the right people have been assembled together by the coroner and what she's done. And as I say, Dave Royer is there, as is the Board of Health, as is the Sheriff, us, CPD, City Fire, and EMS. So all the right people are there. Now, administratively, the best way to do it, as I say, I think the real challenge is in the area of treatment and the funds for treatment and
We know
availability of
that.
treatment. And for that reason, that would seem to be, to me, a combination of Health and Royer, or Adam H.
And the hospitals.
Right.
And that's where the Columbus Foundation put together the task force that they did, looking at how to fund this kind of care and using mental health and addiction services together. And it's tough because so often both go together, with mental health and addiction together, and it's very difficult to see a natural linkage where there's treatment services for one, there's often treatment services for both.
And what,
But I think the good news is all the right people are there now, and it can be massaged to be whatever it needs to be for the benefit of the overall goal. And at least, as I say, I think all the right people are there now. You know, so there's someone from Southeast Mental Health as well. I forgot to mention earlier, Mount Carmel. You mentioned the hospital. There's been a Mount Carmel representative at all these meetings, I think as a designated hospital kind of person, and maybe because they're getting a lot of the cases because they're located on the west side, and many of the overdose deaths arise there. So if they know there's going to be a spike, their emergency room will know first, along with Columbus EMS. So it's a very well, I think, coordinated and organized group now. It's just a matter of, as I say, going forward, finding the right equation to see that everybody still continues to work together. And again, not that everybody wasn't working in their own bailiwick before, it just wasn't as well coordinated as it is now.
Well, Ron, you start.
I really appreciate your work on the Criminal Justice Planning Board as well as the Reentry Coalition on dealing with the getting people into jail and looking at, in a more objective way, in setting bail, how we keep people out of jail and looking, and being willing to take a harder look at some of the issues that you were talking about, because as we look at people that are arrested, and some of them shouldn't even be arrested, but once they're arrested and arraigned, getting bail that's affordable or being released on their own recognizance, if that's appropriate, is the difference between somebody's family falling apart if they're in jail for a month before they get into a trial situation. The whole family falls apart, and you've seen that now since participating in what we're doing with Stepping Up and some of the other initiatives, and I really appreciate the work that your office and you have done to help us.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate the lead that the commissioners have taken on that, and you in particular, along with Michael.
One final comment. You started out your testimony today regarding this issue, discussing that it is statewide, and we're unfortunately the biggest state problem. I would hope that you could bring some of your additional leadership, Ron, to that level, because this doesn't stop at county lines. That's one of the reasons I asked you about the geography. We happen to be fairly prosperous here, so from everything I know, dealing with this issue through the years, drugs and money go together. And if there's anything else that the public can do to help with this, on that statewide awareness level, I think that's really important.
I think that's right, and at least we have worked very closely, as has the coroner, the sheriff, and others, with the attorney general, who's kind of focused on that as well.
We got to keep that going until we solve this.
And, I think what Dr. Ortiz has done has been fantastic, there's no question. As we look to invest going forward and figure out, how do we continue to help and assist here, just want to make sure that we're doing it in the right way, and it's, that's all. So that was the basis of the question. So thank you.
Good.
Thanks.
Well, unless you have any other questions, I'm happy to let you move on to your next budget hearing.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Good work. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Do we have to do